If you have watched this channel for any amount of time, then you know I am a big fan of the DJI Ronin 4D. I believe it is one of the most misunderstood cinema cameras that come out, maybe of all time. Not only can the camera do what it was designed to do, which is to be a gimbal cinema camera that also has a Z-axis that takes out all the bounce out of your step, but the 8K version is also an 8K sensor with internal RAW, internal ProRes, and tons of amazing cinema features. It also has 9 stops of internal ND, which is incredibly useful. So tons of cool features in this camera, but one of my favorites is the fact that it has interchangeable mounts. So you can actually change the mount on the front of the camera, and there are lots to choose from. I have seen EF and PL mounts from third-party manufacturers, and then DJI themselves make a DL mount, which comes with the camera, but it also usually comes with an E mount, which I have on there right now with a small Zeiss Loxia 35mm, but you can also buy an L mount, so you can use all the L mount glass from Panasonic, Leica, and Sigma, as well as an M mount, so you can use smaller M mount rangefinder lenses, or if you have lenses that have an M mount, which I do with the Cooke SP3s, which I changed to M mount so I could use them on a wider variety of camera systems, and my Thypoch Simera-Cs, which I will talk about shortly, also are on M mount. And so you can change out the mount itself and try tons of different lens sets, which is one of the coolest features of the DJI Ronin 4D. Now, because it is a gimbal system that has a Z-axis, it does have some weight limitations on the actual gimbal head itself. So the types of lenses you can use are a little more limited than, say, your normal Canon C70 or C400 or FX6 or Arri Alexa. But because the camera does have the gimbal head, there are some weight limitations to the lenses you can use on the camera itself. And so today we're gonna go through 6 different lens sets that I think are all great options for the Ronin 4D. Now, when we're talking about a lens set for the Ronin 4D, there are a few considerations. And a lot of these considerations are very similar to what you would normally consider when you are trying to decide on a lens set. The first, obviously, is price, what actually fits your budget. And so today we have 6 different lens sets from very cheap to very expensive. And so you'll find something in your budget here. And also you want the lenses to have a similar size and form factor. So if you're using a 24 or 35 and a 50 and maybe even an 85 on the Ronin 4D, when you're changing out the lenses, you want to do the least amount of rebalancing as possible. So having a cohesive size is also really important. And then of course you want the quality of a high-end cinema lens. And all of these lenses deliver that and more. And so let's go through them one by one, from cheapest to most expensive, and you can decide for yourself which lens set you most want to use on your Ronin 4D. First up is one of my favorite lens sets of all time, and that's the Zeiss Loxia. Now, the Zeiss Loxia are an all-manual lens set that was created for the Sony E-mount. And the lens set consisted of quite a few focal lengths. There's a 21, a 25, a 35, a 50, and an 85. So you have 5 lenses that all fit into this lens set. And the 4 that are on the lower end of the spectrum, so everything but the 85, are pretty much all the exact same size and weight. There's a little differentiation between them. See, the 21's a little bit bigger than the 50, but generally they're pretty similar in size and form factor, and so therefore make a really good pairing on the Ronin 4D. Now, I think when they were first launched, the Loxia were pretty popular because there just weren't a lot of lenses for the Sony E-mount at the time, and they were definitely the most professionally built lenses you could get for the system. And Zeiss, being one of the best lens manufacturers in the history of the world, makes some really beautiful lenses. The 35 and 50, those are both f2, and so they are also pretty darn fast, especially for their size and weight. 21 is a 2.8, the 25 and the 85 are a 2.4. So a little bit slower, but on a full frame 8K sensor, you still have that beautiful shallow depth of field if you want it at those faster apertures. Now, I think when people think of Zeiss, they think of clinical perfection. That is true for a lot of their lenses, like the Otus and Milvis series, but the Loxia have a little bit more character than you would normally see in a Zeiss lens, maybe even something closer to the newly announced Atma lenses, which are made to actually have more character. I'm also just a huge sucker for things that are made really, really nicely. It's one reason why I still use Zeiss lenses quite a bit. I love their all metal builds. They have a nice weather sealing ring on the back side of the lens, so these things are pretty weather sealed, though the Ronin 4D is very much not so. And they all have a consistent filter thread, which is also very important on something like the Ronin 4D if you're swapping filters. Because so many new great autofocus lenses have become available, and autofocus is actually good now on cameras, where when these were first released, it really wasn't, so manual focus was not a big deal. You can find these for really, really cheap. So some of these Zeiss Loxia I've found have been anywhere from $300 to $400, which makes them the cheapest lens set you can get for the Ronin 4D that I'm showcasing today. So really beautiful lenses, were somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 new when they were first announced, but now you can pick them up for just a few $100. And if you're using Sony E-mount cameras as a B-cam, these would also be a great fit for the FX3, FX6, or any full-frame Sony E-mount camera. Speaking of Zeiss, one lens set that I would really like to try out on the Ronin 4D is the Batis lens set, which was one of their first autofocus lenses, also made for Sony E-mount. And I can't remember all the focal lengths, but I'm pretty sure there's an 18, a 25, a 40, and then also an 85 and 135. So those first three lenses, 18, 25, and 40, would be a really nice lens set on the Ronin 4D, and I would love to test those out because obviously they are also within the weight limit of the 4D. All right, next up is a lens set that you've heard me talk about on this channel. I have made 2 films with these lenses that were sponsored by Viltrox, and these are the Viltrox Raze lenses. They are made specifically for the Ronin 4D. So when you get them, you realize there's no focus ring, there's no aperture ring, there is nothing on these lenses except just the outer shell, and they integrate with the Ronin 4D automatically. And so very much like the DJI lenses that DJI makes for the 4D and their Inspire drones, these lenses don't need to have any calibration. You just hook them up, the camera recognizes them automatically, saving you time in the setup process. They are also very uniform in size and weight, except again on the either end, like many of these lens sets. So the 24, 28, 35, and 50 are all pretty much the exact same size. Again, pretty small, pretty lightweight, all f1.8, so pretty fast apertures. So if you want to see what these lenses look like, there are 2 films on this channel that were made with these lenses, including my short documentary, A Bottomless Reservoir of Joy, about my friend who is a nature illustrator here in Elkins, West Virginia. And I think they really showcase these lenses in a really, really nice way. So check out that video to see what these lenses look like. So the Viltrox Raze series is about $3,600 for the full 6 lens set, which makes them about $600 a pop. So you can check them out in the description below and pick up your own Viltrox Raze today. Now the next up on the list might be cheaper than the Raze. It's pretty close in terms of price, depending if you get them used or brand new and which ones you get in the set. And that is the beautiful Panasonic 1.8 primes. And they have really built out this lens set for their L-mount cameras like the Panasonic S1R2 or the Panasonic S1 II. And the beautiful thing about these lenses, which makes them really great for the Ronin 4D, is they are almost all identical in terms of size and weight. So if you are changing lenses, you're not gonna have to do any rebalancing when you're using this lens set. There is a 24, a 35, a 50, a 18, an 85, and a 100 f.28 macro. They're pretty much exactly the same size. So this is the 50mm 1.8. And while these lenses aren't filled with incredible character, they do have a really nice look, a very professional look, a commercial look. And I've used these on commercials for Marriott with the S1H and S5 IIX back in the day, and they look wonderful. And they also have this big, beautiful manual focus ring. So if you wanted to put some lens gears on here, then that would be very easy to do. But because the Ronin 4D also has an L mount option, these can also function very similarly to a native lens on the Ronin 4D. Now, prices for these are somewhere between $350 for the 50 up to closer to $1,000 for the more specialized lenses like the 18 1.8. But if you're looking to get them used, you can probably get a pretty nice set of 3 or 4 lenses for under $2,000, which is a pretty great deal for such fast, beautifully made, and really nicely designed lenses. Next up on the list is every YouTuber's favorite mini cinema primes, and that's the Thypoch Simera-Cs. So the Thypoch Simera-Cs kind of took YouTube by storm last year because of their tiny size, very fast apertures at t1.5 across the whole range, and are also very affordable. So each one of these lenses cost around $900, so under $1,000 for every lens in the lens set, but you can get the whole set of 5 lenses for about $4,300, and they all have a very fast t1.5 aperture. Even this 21 that I have in my hands right now is at 1.5, allowing you to get some really wide angle shots, but also with that shallow depth of field, which is often pretty hard to achieve with wide angle lenses. So there is a 21, a 25, a 35, a 50, and a 75mm. And I actually really like that 75mm focal length, and I really wish more people would make those 65 and 75mm focal lengths. It seems like there's always a big gap between 50 and 85, but the 75 is beautiful, and like always, I love the 50 the most, but this 21 is also very, very cool. Another nice thing about the Thypoch Simera-Cs is they already have focus gears on their actual barrel themselves, and so you don't need to add any focus focus gears like you do with the Loxia or the Panasonics. They're also probably somewhere in the middle in terms of build quality. They're definitely more robust than say the Raze or the Panasonic 1.8, but not quite up to the snuff of the Zeiss lenses on the list. But still very well made. I think these will last a long time, and I got them in M mounts so that I can use them on all the different camera systems that I might use in the future, like Canon RF, but you can get them in E mount as well if you want to attach them directly to the Ronin 4D's E mounts. So there's the Thypoch Simera-C. Definitely a great choice, not only for the Ronin 4D, but pretty much any lightweight cinema rig. All right, next up on the list is probably my favorite lens of all time, and that's the brand new mirrorless Zeiss Otus lenses from Zeiss. And these lenses are incredible. I think a lot of the reviews that first came out about these lenses talked about how tons of great autofocus lenses from Sony or Canon are really, really good now. And so the big advantage that the original Zeiss Otus had over lenses of their day just aren't as big anymore, and so you don't see the advantages of getting a manual focus only lens. And I think those initial reviews kind of hurt the Zeiss Otus in their initial reception, but I was lucky enough to test them out last year when I was doing a big test of a bunch of lenses for a new feature documentary, and I was absolutely blown away. As someone who has used a lot of the high-end lenses from Canon and Sony and all the other manufacturers, this is the first time in quite a few years that I've put a lens on my camera and was instantly blown away by the image, and reviewing them side by side on my computer afterwards showcased just how amazing the Zeiss Otus 50mm was. And then they announced the Zeiss Otus 85mm, which is as incredible as the 50, maybe even more so. And they just announced the Zeiss 35mm, which is why they now are a very compelling option for the Ronin 4D. Now, right now, they don't have the amount of focal lengths that a lot of the other sets do in this video, but they do have the 35 and 50, which are by far my two most used focal lengths in pretty much any project, but especially on the Ronin 4D. All you have to do is add a focus gear. This is just a cheap $3 one from Tilta. They make a lot of really nice focus gears. Just figure out what your girth of your lens is, and you find the one that fits you. And so suddenly this lens becomes not a manual focus only photography lens, but a mini cinema prime that is sharper and more beautiful than any other lens out there. The 85 might be a bit too heavy. I currently only have it in RF, so I cannot test it out on the Ronin 4D because that's pretty much the one mount that you can't use on the 4D. But I do think that one might be a little bit heavy. But I've used quite a few lenses that are close to a kilo or even over a kilo with the adapters, and so I think it could work in some situations. The Zeiss Otus are also just beautifully built. Even the next lens on this set, the very popular Cooke SP3s, feel a little cheap when you compare them to these beautiful lenses. I mean, it is all metal. The focus ring is incredibly dampened and just like the perfect amounts of push and pull to actually focus these things. A really nice aperture ring that you can declick if you'd like. The 35 and 50 also have a uniform size and weight, so if you were going to change them on the 4D, there would be very little rebalancing needed. I would love a wider lens in this set, and hopefully sometime this year or next year, Zeiss brings out an Otus 24mm or even a 21mm, but I'm assuming that one will be quite a bit larger and heavier than the 50 and 35. And though they are expensive for a manual focus photography lens, for a mini cinema prime, they're actually pretty affordable. So right now, I believe Zeiss has quite a few of the 50mm on sale for about $2,000. The brand new 35mm is $2,300, and then the 85 is closer to $3,000. So you're working at somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 per lens, which is very expensive. I completely agree with that, but is right up there with a lot of Canon's high-end 1.4 and 1.2 primes and Sony's 1.4 and 1.2 primes. So I think these are also quite a bit better. And because the Ronin 4D's autofocus system is LiDAR, you can get autofocus with these lenses in the same way that you would with a Sony or Panasonic lens on the Ronin 4D. Now, the last set on the lenses is by far the most expensive, but probably also the most popular for higher end productions on the Ronin 4D, and that is the Cooke SP3s. Now, the Cooke SP3s are based off of the Cooke Panchros series, so they have really incredible character. The bokeh is pretty wild, and out of all the lenses I've talked about today, these by far have the most character and warmth to the image. So there are 6 lenses in the Cooke SP3 set. So there's the 18, the 25, the 32, the 50, the 75, amazing focal length, and the 100mm. And while they aren't built as well as the Zeiss Otus, they're still built really, really nicely. And they're an all metal build, beautiful big focus gear on there, which is really nice, and also on the aperture they have that as well, and that's really nice to have on the Ronin 4D. Really easy to connect your follow focus directly onto these lenses, and they're also tiny for what they are. So really small lenses, and the middle range are all pretty uniform in terms of size and weight. So if you're using the 25, the 32, the 50, the 75, almost no rebalancing is needed on the Ronin 4D. The 100 and the 18 are a little bit longer, a little bit heavier, and have a bigger filter thread, and so you do need to rebalance those, but it's pretty quick. Now, probably the only downside compared to a lot of the other lenses on this list is they are only a T2.4, so they're not super fast. If you're gonna do a lot of low light imagery with the Ronin 4D, you might think about grabbing one of the Thypoch Simera-Cs to match with these lenses, because those are 1.5, and if you get yourself in a dark situation, you might need that extra stop and a half of light. These have been used pretty widely on some of the higher end productions, and you'll see them in behind the scenes footage, and were most famously used on the Netflix miniseries Adolescence with the Ronin 4D, and that was a beautifully made series, and I believe they used the 32mm for almost that entire series, and it's a really, really nice look. I am currently shooting a feature documentary on the Ronin 4D, and the Cooke SP3s are our lens set for those. And if I was going to choose today, I might go with the Zeiss Otus, but the Cookes are so nice that you can't go wrong with those either. Now, the one huge downside with the Cooke SP3s is that they are incredibly expensive. So each lens is about $4,500, and a full lens set is over 20 grand. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart to add these lenses to your lens kit. If you're like me and you're on a feature documentary that shoots over the course of 50 or 60 days and you rent your equipment to the production, as long as they agree to pay the rental price of the Cooke SP3s, then it makes a lot of financial sense to pick something like this up. These lenses also have an incredible amount of character. For a T2.4, they really do look like they're faster in terms of their out of focus rendering. You don't have to be all that close to your subject to get a really unique look. And while some people say it's a little distracting, it also is really unique. So when you use these lenses, your images will stand out. One thing I've noticed with the Cooke SP3s that I don't see on the Zeiss Otus is just a little bit of an inconsistency with the focus rings. Some are really well dampened, like this 50mm, but I've noticed that some are a little looser, a little tighter, and so there's not a perfect level of consistency across the range, but otherwise they're built really, really nicely. So that's the Cooke SP3s, probably the most popular choice for high-end productions, and if you've got the cash or can rent them back to a production that you're going to be on, it might be a really good set to pick up. So that's some great lens sets for the Ronin 4D, from pretty darn cheap to very expensive. And so depending on your budget level, you can look at one of those 6 lens options. But I'm only one person who only has so much money and so many projects to rent back my equipment to, and so I haven't tested out all the lens possibilities for the Ronin 4D. Obviously, the most obvious one is the DJI lenses themselves. They're pretty nice, but I think for the price, I would go with one of the other options I've talked about today, rather than going with the native DJI lenses, unless you have something like an Inspire 3 and you want to share lenses between your drone and your Ronin 4D. Obviously, there are all the lenses on L mount and E mount, and so for Sony, there are just tons of options. I've already mentioned the Zeiss Batis, which I think would be a really cool set for the Ronin 4D, but there's also all of Sony's f1.4, f1.2, and f1.8 lenses that definitely fit in the weight limit of the Ronin 4D. So you could get a G Master and have some really nice images. Because I don't use Sony very often, I haven't had a chance to test those out, but hopefully in the future I will be able to. And then for those who love anamorphic video, as I do as well, there are a lot of new lightweight anamorphic lenses that you can use on the Ronin 4D. I have used the Blazar Remus on the Ronin 4D, and that pairing actually functioned as a B cam to an Arri Alexa Mini and Cooke anamorphic, so some really high-end lenses for a feature documentary on an Olympic runner, and they slid right into the production in a great way. You do need to stop them down in order to match anywhere close to the sharpness and detail of the Cooke anamorphics, but for action and running and sprinting through the woods, obviously they looked incredible. And now that Blazar is putting out lenses that have native E mounts and L mounts, those would even be a better option because you don't need that extra adapter to adapt the PL or EF mount lenses to the Ronin 4D, which saves you a lot of space and makes balancing a lot easier. I wish I could show you a lot of the incredible footage we captured with the Blazar Remus on the Ronin 4D. Some of my favorite shots of all time were in that combo running through the redwoods in California. So hopefully that movie's out soon so you can check it out. One lens manufacturer that I completely forgot to talk about when I was making this video, and right before I almost stopped recording, I popped in my head that I have these incredible lenses. as well, and that is the Sigma I series. So these are these beautifully made all metal lenses. They're kind of like mini cinema primes from Sigma, and they're also relatively affordable. And they're also very, very fast. So there's a lot of f2 and f2.8 lenses in the set. And here is a 65mm f2, and I also have a 35mm f2. And they also have focus gears just like the Cooke's built in, and so you can attach the Ronin 4D follow focus directly onto the lens itself. So the f2s are all pretty similar, and then the slower f2.8s and f3.5 lenses are quite a bit smaller, but also fairly uniform in size as well. And so if you were changing lenses with these, it would also be a really, really nice set. And so these fall somewhere around the Panasonic f1.8 primes in terms of price, and could be a really nice option. But that also reminds me of all the incredible Sigma f1.4 and f1.2 art lenses that are definitely under the 1 kilo limit of the Ronin 4D. And so those would also be an incredible option. So there you go, some incredible lens sets for the DJI Ronin 4D, from the Cooke SP3s and the Zeiss Otus to all the other ones I mentioned. There are plenty of lenses you can use on this incredible camera system, and I am very much looking forward to what DJI does next, and hopefully an update to the Ronin 4D that gives us even more of their incredible technology. Things I probably can't even think of right now that they'll release, and it'll be awesome. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the Ronin 4D and the lenses I mentioned, and tell me if there are any other lens sets I should try out on my own DJI Ronin 4D. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Every once in a while, a piece of filmmaking equipment comes along that makes you stop and think, wait a second, this changes everything.